Welcome to the Birth Squad podcast. If you're riding with the squad,
hey fam!
And if you're new,
welcome to the squad. We're your hosts, Dr. Ijama Okwando and Dr. Kanisha Thomas. We're two licensed obstetrician and gynecologists, as well as best friends.
The Birth Squad is a podcast for birthing individuals by two Black female physicians who use stories from real women to educate about pregnancy, birth experiences, reproductive health, and all things in between.
And while we hope that you love learning from our podcast, it is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So please consult your healthcare provider for your specific care. And to learn more about us and about the podcast, please follow us on Instagram at The Birth Squad. And also check out our website, thebirthsquad.com.
Please keep in mind that some of our episodes may cover topics that could be triggering to some individuals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Birth Squad podcast. This is a very special episode because we have the privilege of having two amazing doulas today to talk about what a doula is and their practice and things like that. So we have Chandler and Michelle here today, and welcome to the Birth Squad.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Of course. So, Chandler, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and then how you became a doula? And then Michelle, same question for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Chandler. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I became a doula way back in 2019, which I look at it now and I'm like, how in the world has 5 years gone by as a doula? But I truly, truly love it. And I think there's no way to talk about my role as a doula without also talking about what I do in my other career as a registered nurse and soon to be nurse practitioner in 2 months. So I think it's really important to talk about both because that is what truly brought me to doula work. When I was going through my clinicals way back when in nursing school, I was able to care for my patients and I really felt like I could care for them from a medical perspective, but I felt like there was something lacking. And that piece that I was missing was being able to connect to my patients from an emotional standpoint. And I went to a conference and I was sharing this back and forth with someone I had met at the conference. And they're like, have you looked into doula work? Have you thought about it? And I immediately went home, started doing my research, found Doula Training International, which was the greatest for me program to kind of get into with my busy schedule. So I was able to start with that program. It's a 12-month training program that I kind of went through, and I can talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but it was a program that set me up, I think, honestly, for success with doula work and being able to have that foundation as to, what do I want to do and what do I want to focus on as a doula, because there's so many different realms of doula work. So it was making that decision between a birth doula, a postpartum doula, or did I want to take on full spectrum doula? So I went the full spectrum route, but it has ultimately been so rewarding, and I truly love what I do.
Same question for you.
Yeah, so my name is Mish. I have been a doula also since 2019. And yeah, that was interesting when you said that. I was like, oh, me too. And I kind of fell into being a doula accidentally. Childcare has always been in my life. I'm the oldest of 4. And, was always the one to watch the kids, but one of my friends got pregnant in 2019 during COVID. And, really isolating time to be pregnant. We were in New York City, and I ended up supporting her through her birth, simply because she didn't have any other support. And then from there, when she got pregnant the second time, and I supported her through a lot of complications, which, I can talk about later on, but that's when she was the one who actually suggested that I, move forward with being a doula. She felt like it was super supportive, and just with everything she went through. And so, I thought about it. And from there, I ended up getting certified, starting my own doula business. And, it's been forward pushing ever since.
Thank you for sharing that. Kind of right on the heels of what you both mentioned, I'll ask Chandler if you could tell us a little bit about the process of becoming trained to be a doula. And then I would like if each of you could share what your practice looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went through Doula Training International. At the time when I went to DTI, they had two different options, an in-person option or an online option. And I kind of looked to see, okay, do I want to do in person? It was intensives over the weekend, or did I want to do online? And for me, online fit a lot better with my schedule and what I was doing. But I think it was so structured where they would course out the coursework every month. So you would see new material every month. And throughout that process, you had to accomplish a couple different goals, make a couple different targets. So with the full spectrum program, I had to do 3 primary births. So I had to find a client, get on as their primary doula, which was for me so nerve wracking, but it is definitely possible. And if you are looking into becoming a doula, I am here to support you in that, because that is exactly what I was looking for, another doula to support me and kind of helping me find those initial births. And then for postpartum care, I had to serve 3 different women that I could provide postpartum care to. And it ended up just being such a beautiful experience, because I worked with these women for weeks on weeks with their care. And then I also tagged on a little bit of infertility, which now has grown into my ultimate specialty in my career as well. So that was really interesting, getting to learn different aspects of infertility and what different patients are experiencing. So I went through each of those different segments throughout my 12-month course. And then at the end, your final to do is to build your own business with DTI. And so it was really great because it helped me with marketing. They give you the tools, they give you all of the educational resources that you need. So they really did set you up for success in terms of providing you with the toolkits. And then they have an online program where, as long as you became a doula through DTI, they have a database where you can go on and people can find you, and they're able to kind of research, the work that you do and the area you're located in. So, it was a long process, but I think with the support of everyone around me, I connected with a couple different local midwives that really helped me through the process. So I think establishing those connections is essential when getting your training done, because you have to know people that kind of have done it and seen everything before you.
Do you mind me asking real quick, if you don't mind sharing, how much does that cost? Are there grants available or
Yeah,
scholarships available?
there's absolutely grants out there. They are far and few, though. I know for my program in 2019, I paid about 1,000 for the program, which was pretty comparable when I was looking at everything. There's also Dona. That's phenomenal as well. So just looking at the different programs, everything was pretty comparable to around 1,000.
Thank you. Now, Mish, did your process look similar to Chandler's, or was yours separate?
Yeah, it definitely is similar. I know for me, I was battling whether or not I wanted to be certified. Just looking at the different programs, I wanted to find a program that really represented what I was about and my, I guess, idea of like what a doula brings to the table. And so after some searching, I found a program, the Birth Coaching Method here in the Bay. And Neri Choma oversees that. And so I ended up training with her for about 6 months total for the training. And after the 6 months, we were required to attend 3 births, I believe. And we were also connected with clients via El Camino Hospital here in the Bay, actually, with the midwives there. So we attended some of the midwife conversations, and the midwives would come to our trainings and kind of teach us about their experiences just in the birth world, what a doula brings to the table, and things like that. So very similar. I would say my training max was a year. They were pretty flexible in how you could complete the coursework because everything was downloaded for you and you can kind of do it at your own pace. And so between that and, getting connected with the birth families, you had up to a year to finish it, and similar pricing as well.
Is your practice full scope like Chandler's as well?
Yes, yes. So specifically through my practice, I offer prenatal care, postpartum care, as well as, labor and delivery. And I've also delved into, loss, just supporting people who've gone through miscarriages or stillbirths, just because it is a little bit more common than I thought it was, initially coming into the doula world, just understanding that there's support needed there as well. So that's something I offer as well.
That is wonderful. Thank you both for sharing about that. So I think you obviously have already touched on it already, but for our listeners who maybe are not aware, what exactly does a doula do? And then how does that role differ from, like, let's say a midwife or an OBGYN or a nurse? How does that differ?
Yeah, so I would start off by saying a doula is truly there to provide emotional support, to provide education, to also provide physical support, but it's not from a medical perspective. So this is non-medical care that is being provided as a doula, where we see midwives are able to care for patients from a medical perspective, as well as OBs, with midwives being more low risk and then OBs being able to intervene with different interventions and things like that. Doula work is truly based on supporting and advocating for our patients and being able to be their voice when they are a little bit more timid, but also really supporting them, knowing that their concerns are valid, that they're being heard, and you know, there is something to say about a doula is different from a family member that is there. It's different from a partner that is there. And I think that's so important to stress, because a doula brings in another aspect of comfort that I think is so necessary in, the prenatal stages, in labor and delivery, and as well as the postpartum stages, that really just helps people heal from the entire birthing experience.
I think you bring up a really good point. One thing that I always keep in mind is that, a lot of times people are having a baby and it's the first time they're ever in the hospital for some people, to actually be a patient, to be hospitalized, to being there for multiple days. So that experience in of itself is, kind of scary. And then adding on an unknown with a birth. So I'm just so glad that the two of you have created a space where you can, really help women and support them, empower them, inform them during such a vulnerable time.
Definitely.
We wanted to also kind of get at what are some of the key benefits, right, of having a doula during the labor and birth process, based on your guys' experiences, and especially for Black women. Like maybe we can have Mish, have you answer that question first, and if you want to add anything, you can, Chandler. But what has been your experience like serving the Black community, and why do you feel like it may or may not be important?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that question is so important, and I think it can be supported just with evidence-based information, that shows that there is a correlation between having the support of a doula and, for a lot of Black and brown women, surviving the birth, which is pretty insane to think about. And so that alone, tells us that, doula work is actually making a difference in people's lives and saving them in many instances. And I know for me, I have a background in law, and so advocacy is huge. And I know, in the Bay, we have an array of different hospitals. Some of them are awesome, and, less advocacy is necessary. They support the client. But unfortunately, some hospitals are not like that. And, some of my clients have just been numbers. And it's evident, as soon as before they even go in for labor and delivery, honestly, as they're going to get their prenatal checkups and their appointments, not feeling safe to ask questions, feeling rushed during the process, which is something new for a lot of moms. Every birth is new. And so even if you've experienced a pregnancy before, it's totally different the second time, and it's quite unfortunate. And so I think for me, obviously the education, I think, informed based decisions is huge. But I think you can see the specifics and outcome, obviously as a doula just in general, but especially in the advocacy piece, and especially in the information that we're able to support our clients with during those prenatal sessions that they would otherwise find out during labor and delivery at times. So
I completely agree with you, Mish. And I think it's so important that you highlight it starts with the prenatal stages. And it is so important that this education is provided to our clients early on, because a lot of what we see in the media and what we see in the news, it's scary. And for Black and brown women, they see it and immediately they have a wall that's put up. They have defense mechanisms that are put up because they are afraid to enter the hospital setting. And I think it's so important to normalize that, those feelings are real and they are very valid. And talking through those conversations before you get to labor and delivery, so that they feel equipped with, the proper education, and they know that they can ask questions, and that, they have a voice when they do enter the hospital.
Chandler, I think you touched on it a little bit, but how do you specifically help birthing people and their partners and their support people prepare for labor and birth, like both emotionally, mentally, and physically?
So I start off all of my care with just an introductory visit. Like I say, I just want to meet, I want to know your expectations. I want to know what you're looking for. I want to know any fears you may have, kind of just laying everything out on the table. And I think it's so important that you hear that up front when taking anyone into care. And then beyond that, I do provide tons of education. So I tell them, please, please, if it's in the middle of the night, send me a text message and reach out to me with those burning questions, because I want them to be answered. I don't want you to hold them in. And so providing them with, I love evidence-based birth. It is a great tool for patients to kind of refer to, so that they're not grabbing false information. I think it's so important that you are able to give them all of the tools and then let them make these informed decisions. Let them come to the conclusions on their own. So creating these visits with them throughout the prenatal stages, so that I can provide education, so that I can provide, the evidence that we have out there. And then also, I'm just one person. There are so many people out there to help my clients. And so I share the wealth. So if I know there is something that they need, that there is another doula that can assist in that particular aspect of their care, I bring on a team. So I think it's just so important to know that there's so many outlets. I walk them through childbirth education. And then if I feel like they still need a little bit more, I'll refer them to someone that I know and trust really well, that can walk them through even more, and spend that time with them over a 6-week, course of time. So I think it's just important that I bring in pieces of education, but then also preparing them for their birth as well. So giving them all the tools in terms of the different positions that they can be in, the different comfort measures that we can do. What is a peanut ball? Having those conversations with them, and really just, allowing them to see what's out there, see what aspects of care they have, available to them, and really just saying, okay, I'm here to walk you through it, to hold your hand. And I think the most important thing of it all, is holding space. And when I went through my doula training, it was so important that everyone was able to truly understand the concept of holding space. And so as a doula, when we say, we are holding space for a patient, it is truly, letting them know that we're there to listen, we're there to be a sounding board and provide that truly unconditional support that our patients need. And it's non-judgmental. It is a space where, they can share all of their fears and really get the feedback that they need, but also get the listening ear that they need.
Mish, did you want to add anything to that?
I definitely agree with that approach. I do this pretty much the same thing. And I think that way, especially during that initial call, right? Like that's our ability to really build rapport with the client, and help them to understand what a doula does. Because, a lot of people, I find that they either don't know what a doula is, or they're not understanding the full scope of what a doula can offer. And so, I love that you said that you do that initial call for them to really have that space to really talk about anything and everything and kind of get to know you, because I think that's really important. But yeah, I agree with that approach, and take a very similar one as well.
Are there some specific like resources that you kind of mentioned it, but some resources you like to share with your clients? And then the other thing I was curious was, do either of you do like tandem care? Or are you guys like exclusive? It's just me, I'm on call. Because some people may not know what that means to do have like tandem doula care. So if either of you are willing to kind of talk about what does your practice look like as far as that concern is concerned, and some of those resources that you share with your clients. But I don't want you to give all of it away, right? Because I want them, if they can, to reach out to you guys. But if you guys give us just like a little peek into it.
Sure, sure. I think it really depends on the client and what they're looking for. I have some clients that will come in and say they really want to try for a natural birth. They want to do it unmedicated. And so I will incorporate a little bit more hypnotherapy or hypnobirthing techniques for that client, because I find that is really beneficial. And then maybe I'll have a client, like right now I have a client that has a lot of underlying pain, just, prior accidents, a lot of back pain and things like that. And so I have to be really aware of, okay, like what can she really tolerate, especially when it comes to a natural birth, which is her priority or her desire. And so that's working with physical therapists, chiropractors in the area that I know do good work. I have clients that I've been to, and I feel good about referring them, and even tag teaming and thinking about, okay, like how can we really best help this person. And so, yeah, whether it's massage therapists, chiropractors, physical therapists, even lactation specialists, I think it's important to, not just, we can't offer everything to the client, right? But we can bring in resources that can really meet their needs, and I think that that's really important as well. I think doula care is obviously about representing the client and being there to support them, but also connecting them with the right resources.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think it truly is about listening to the client and hearing what it is that they need and they want, what their vision is for their birth, kind of setting those expectations from the beginning and saying, okay, here's this amazing, hypnobirthing. Yes, I absolutely love hypnobirthing class that I can send you to. I don't practice, so I don't know how to teach a hypnobirthing class. So yes, I would have to send them to someone that I know and I trust. And, I love that you bring in the idea of chiropractic care and acupuncture even. I think it's so important to utilize non-Western medicine as well when it comes to this, and really just bridging the gap between the Western medicine world and the non-Western medicine world. There are so many different non-traditional therapies out there that are helpful to clients and to expectant mothers, but I think it's important that you provide that space so that they feel comfortable to ask questions about what safe practices are, because ultimately we want our clients to be safe. And I think it's so important that we have that conversation, that open conversation with them, so that they're not doing anything that could be potentially harmful simply because they don't feel like they can talk about it. And they don't feel like they can talk about this acupuncture that they're going to see, or these herbs that they're taking, because they don't want it to be frowned upon. And so I think it's so important that, yes, you do bring in, other experts, and you do talk about it and you have those conversations. So without a doubt, I think tandem care is necessary. And even when it comes to bringing on an additional doula, I will absolutely do that. Kind of depends on the month and my flow for the month. If usually I take on 2 to 3 clients a month. But if I feel like I am stretched a little thin, I think it is so important to always have that backup, that rock that you can kind of lean on. And doulas need doulas too. And I think it's just so important to realize that we need just as much support, and finding those people that can be in your corner and support you in the births that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and introduce them to your clients as well, saying, if anything happens, just know, they're here to support you as well. And we practice in very similar manners so that they feel comfortable going into things.
So, one question that I did want to touch upon is that, as a doula, you are definitely like the patient advocate. while during like the hospital experience particularly. And I know that sometimes the labor process can be quite unpredictable, and there might be sometimes, I don't want to say conflict, but like different priorities between your client and maybe the healthcare team in the hospital. So in what ways do you advocate for the birthing person's wishes and preferences, with especially within that setting?
For sure.
So I would say starting off.
No, go ahead, Phil. It's okay.
Go ahead, Mish. I would definitely say starting off with that birth plan. So we know expectations, sharing the birth plan with the client and going through it, dissecting it, making sure it is exactly what they have, kind of thought about and they've envisioned for their birth. But then I also think it's very important to make sure they have a copy of that birth plan and that birth plan is given to their provider. So that way everyone can be on the same page. And if there's anything that kind of comes up beforehand, we can address it before a mother is in labor. And I think that's so important. And the reason why it kind of helps prevent some conflict is because if there's things that, maybe being in the hospital setting doesn't encourage or whatever it may be, we're able to put that on the table. We're able to have those discussions and give them educated answers as to why this is, for your safety. This is for baby safety, and we're able to talk through those things before. But also, when it comes to the birthing setting, and when they're in labor, I think it's important to say, we can have that moment to take a step back. And if you need time to make decisions, it's okay. It's okay for me to step out of the room for a little bit while you and your partner have a discussion. You don't have to make immediate decisions. And I think, if there is an emergency, it will be made known. But outside of that, you can have these discussions. It does not have to be anything that you feel cornered into. And really just setting that expectation from the beginning.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. I think my two biggest things are reading the room, and slowing down. I think there are some emergency situations, and sometimes the birth plan goes out the window, and it doesn't mean that it has to be a failed birth experience or a negative birth experience even. I think we can still support our clients in those unexpected situations or circumstances. And I think, Chandler, you mentioned communicating that ahead of time. And I think that's important. I think, sometimes we will have, clients that are at risk for, certain things like preeclampsia or gestational diabetes. And if we know that ahead of time, we can really help to build their mental fortitude so that they understand what they may expect, right? But there are some times where you can't expect that, you can't plan for it. Your birth or your pregnancy has been great, and then day of labor, things start to just go haywire, and I think that, in those situations where we can see that it's like, okay, this might be a little bit of an emergency. This is not a situation where they're trying to maybe trump over our client's desires. It's like reading the room to know that and be able to discern that. And then also, like, in situations where it isn't an emergency, helping the staff to slow down a bit. I mean, they're doing this every day, multiple times a day. There's a level of being desensitized, and we can understand that. And so I try to go in with that understanding and with the mindset of like, okay, we're a team trying to all get to the end goal of healthy mom, healthy baby. Maybe our approaches may be a little bit different in how we do that, but we don't have to be at odds. And I find that's, can be a better approach, especially with maybe some hospitals that aren't so doula friendly. I think it requires us to come in a lot more humble. And at the end of the day, if that means that it's going to be a positive outcome for our client, then that's what we have to do.
Mish, you brought up a really great point about how sometimes complications arise. Like they could have a perfect pregnancy, then you get to the hospital and things look different, and your birth plan doesn't what you wanted for your birth plan doesn't quite happen. How do you manage that? Like, how do you help the client and their family deal with that?
Yeah. So I have a background in mental health. Mental health is extremely important to me. And so in the beginning of my prenatal classes, like that is something I talk about a lot with my clients. just the need for that kind of support, whether that looks like an individual therapist, couples therapist. And I find that my clients who engage therapy early on and are in those kind of situations do way better postpartum than, maybe individuals that don't have that targeted mental support. And so I know for my clients, I like to focus on, okay, like, let's remember, what can we control, right? Like during the pregnancy, we can control food intake, activity, we can control the kind of information that we're, digesting, is it going to be evidence-based or is it going to be primarily social media, which will have you overwhelmed, and so I like to really emphasize like being in control of what we are actually in control of and having a surrendered heart and mind for things that may be out of our control. And I think that that really sets people up for more success. And again, they can look at their birth experience as positive, even if it's unexpected, or even if there are elements of it that weren't planned, you know? And I find that that works a lot better than, perhaps someone that is a little bit more rigid and maybe unwilling to have that kind of surrendered approach, or unwilling to really work on mental fortitude and talk about, some of the topics that are a little bit scary to talk about, like how they're really feeling, what they're really thinking beforehand. And so yeah, I think I try to take that approach, and I believe that it has helped, I try to just take that approach in my normal life, but definitely when it comes to pregnancy, for sure.
Yeah, I love that you brought up that point of just what is within our control. It is so important to just kind of introduce that idea, that concept to our patients, because there's so much that's out of our control when it comes to birthing and entering the unknown of, delivery. And I think it's so important if they know, I'm just here knowing I have the support I need. And I think that's really what helps them through these difficult situations. And then also, highlighting the importance of postpartum care. I think in the moment, some things can be very, very hard to digest, to acknowledge, but there's so much power in having that initial postpartum visit with your patients when they're ready, when they feel like it's time to digest their birthing experience, and walk through everything from start to finish, really just allowing them to find that control and take that control back, as saying like, okay, this is what I was able to control. This was out of my control, and that's okay. It's okay that it happened this way, because at the end of the day, we were able to accomplish our goal of healthy mom, healthy baby. So I think it's just so important, just bring it all full circle with postpartum care.
Sounds like the two of you have had a wealth of experience. Is there any particular memorable moments, perhaps that were particularly challenging or really heartwarming, that you would share with the squad?
For sure, for sure. I think of one client, she, had some challenges getting pregnant, went through IVF, and it was, down to this last, like, egg. And so in many ways, her child was a miracle, and I remember first meeting her, and, during the consultation, she was super guarded, like, it was like really hard, to kind of penetrate that. But I shared with her some of my own challenges with just loss, and that really helped to, let the wall down. And so thinking about our first meeting to where she's at now, 2 months postpartum, making decisions, feeling confident in those decisions, just doing it. She's just doing it. And it's just so exciting, like, to see, and on my last day, like, it was hard. It was really hard to not be seeing her as often as I did, because there does come a time where we close that chapter with our client. Obviously, a lot of clients become friends, which is awesome. But, we have to allow them to kind of parenthood, on their own in some ways. And I just reflected and was thinking about like where she was first, like fear, driven, and, very afraid to even be happy because of how much loss she's experienced just in the pregnancy process, to being excited and being able to like own the fact that she's a mom now. And so, yeah, I think that was a really like awesome experience that I had. This client is like a great friend now. And I think one of the more challenging experiences that I had, I actually stepped in as a backup to one of my friends who is an amazing doula here in the Bay. And her client was going through severe postpartum depression, severe, and actually went missing at one point. And so the dad actually needed a lot of support at this point. He had been up for like almost 3 days. And so I think for me, it was really just challenging to come in and just see the state that he was in, and see how things kind of, obviously didn't go as planned. Nobody plans to experience postpartum depression, but also thinking about some of the things that maybe could have been beneficial, but for one reason or another, weren't really accepted as a remedy or a possibility. And so I think that was really hard. It's tough to see people in that state. And of course, like as doulas, we want to do everything we can, but sometimes like there's a cap in what we're actually able to do, and that's when you have to kind of get other professionals involved. And so I think anytime, I have a client dealing with any kind of postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, it can be tough. It can take its toll. And, I like how Chandler said, like, doulas need doulas. And I think especially when we are exposed to these kind of situations and having to support clients that are going through things like this, it's especially important. I would say that's probably one of the more challenging experiences for me.
Chandler, how about you?
I would say my most memorable experience, and I like just smile thinking about it, was my very first doula experience after I'd finished my certification. It was, the best experience, but I think it taught me so much. And that is the reason why it stands out to me. I didn't know I could learn so much from my client. Had no idea what to expect. And she, from every step of the way, she was like encouraging me. She's like, I know it's your first one, but let's do this. Like, you got this. Like, she encouraged me the entire way. And it was such a beautiful experience and beautiful interaction between the two of us. We went to birthing classes together. We really grew a bond that was like no other. And we are still friends today. And I think it's just so important to be able to say, this is how I want to, continue my practice. And that is really what started, who I am as a doula and how I practice. And, I'm able to reach out to my clients and say, hey, want to go grab tea? Like, I don't know if you had a long week, but let's just connect. Like, it doesn't have to be anything about baby. I just want to make sure you're good. And I want to make sure you get out the house and that you feel like you're doing things outside of just focusing on pregnancy. And so I think it's just so important that I had that experience with my first client that really showed me it's so much more. Doula work is so much more than just focusing in on those visits every single time and the education. It's really just looking at your client and saying, what do they need? Do I need to bring them out of the house? And, do I need to just kind of get them out and normalize just how they're feeling if they're a little bit anxious, to kind of bring down some of those walls. And I think knowing that I had that experience as my first client, it really has made me such a strong doula. And I'm so excited to be able to say that because, I was pretty nervous going into my first one. I didn't know what to expect. And, you want to do, like you said, Mish, you want to do all the right things. You want to do everything right. So you overextend yourself in so many ways and you're just hoping that, they get something out of it. But little did I know I was going to be getting something out of it too. And I think it's so great that you bring up a challenging experience with the partner, with dad. I can definitely say I have seen that and been through that exact experience, and it's not talked about enough. I think the work that we do is so unique in that we're able to provide care to families, but sometimes we forget about that. And I don't think it's fair it's not fair. So we have to realize that we are providing care to the full family. And it's so important that we see that and we know that we recognize that, they need just as much support. I always say, like, from visit one, I'm like, please get the birth partner by Penny Semkin. It is necessary. Everyone should have that. If you are with someone who's going through labor. So whether you're a doula, a dad, a partner, just whatever it may be, I think it's important that, partners have their support persons have their toolkit too. So I think it's important.
Thank you both for sharing that. I think you both have mentioned some of the ways, like personal things that you bring into your practice, and some background that you have in law and mental health have also like shaped the way you provide care. And I think, Mish, you kind of briefly talked about like a personal experience that shaped the way you counsel your clients. But can you guys think of or share with us what are some other experiences, whether it's personal or professional, that help inform the way you care and counsel your clients?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, just supporting my goddaughters in their births, which was my first birth experience back in 2019, and seeing what one of my closest friends, what she went through firsthand, and being the person that she was calling when she was not listened to by the doctor, and ended up getting mastitis because, when she thought that there was something wrong, she was ignored. And so, you take note of those things that, your friends or your sister, or people that go through, because you don't want other people to experience that. And it also helps you to understand a little bit further what the experience is, because for me personally, I don't have any children, right? And so I rely on those connections to really understand fully what women, especially brown and black women, are going through, what they're experiencing firsthand. So the clients and their experiences that we support them through, but also just the connections like in life, and I think that really helps me to be able to support in the way that I want to support. And then my own personal, battles as well. My dad passed away a few years ago. And so that has really helped me to have compassion, and I may not understand what it is to maybe lose a child or go through that, but I understand what it is to like lose somebody that's close to you, and the compassion that is necessary, to be able to overcome that, and so those are the things that I really lean on, to help support in that human way, more than just the knowledge that we bring and the understanding of, different terminology and all of that. It's really just like that human touch that you need to be a doula.
That's such a good statement to make. And like, yeah, I love hearing that. So thank you, Mish, for sharing that. And when I think about my personal experience just with doula work, like I said, I started off with being a birth doula and seeing my patients through prenatal visits as well as doing postpartum care. And recently I have taken initiative to take on quite a few fertility patients as my clients. And I think it's so important that we highlight this, not really talked about concept. And it's been so important to me. So I currently work in reproductive medicine, and I'm able to see how many patients walk through my doors every single day and see the need out there for support beyond a fertility journey. Fertility only goes up to a certain point where they're actually in their fertility office. And so when they walk out of those doors, they're so nervous about what's to come because they've had, 3, 4, 5 years of experiencing infertility. And so they're so scared. And being able to see that on a day to day, when I go to work, it has really poured into my doula care and kind of shifting how I like to provide care and who I'm kind of looking for us to take on as clients, because I think it's so important to reach out to a population or, a group of people that need the help and that don't really know that there's help out there for them when they are going through their pregnancy and able to answer those questions for them that they may have. So I think it's really just kind of been such a difference from 2019, how I had started practicing, to now, in 2024, I'm following the need. And I think it's so important that I'm able to kind of take in my life experiences, my personal experiences, and say, okay, so how can I use this and pour it into my clients? And so that's the outlet that I've kind of chosen at this point. And who knows where that'll take me and how things will kind of develop over the next few years. But I think right now it's been a huge highlight, and I've been super aware of just what's out there and, who needs support, and offering up that extra leg of just infertility support now has been really eye-opening for me. But I just hope that I'm able to give back to those patients that, maybe went through a fertility journey before and didn't have that. Now they're like, wait, there's support out there, there's help out there. So being able to give that is really, it's great. It feels really good.
So you both have given lots of reasons why people should consider having a doula, whether it be for their infertility journey, through the prenatal, labor, postpartum. But if there was someone who is considering hiring a doula but is unsure, what advice would you give them to help them make that decision?
I would definitely say, find your different doula databases that you can look around on, whether it be DONA, DTI. There's even great Facebook groups, to be completely honest with you. But do your research and schedule interviews. When you find one, schedule another interview, even if you love that one. I think it's so important to find someone that really aligns with your values, and they're just able to hear your preferences, and you feel heard, and you feel like, okay, like I think our personalities match, and I think we can, move through this together. And this is someone that I can see myself, getting to know and trust and feel supported by. So don't limit yourself. I think if you are looking for doula care, it is so important to see what options are out there, because not everyone is for everyone. But I do think there's so much out there that you have, there's someone out there for you. And it's easy to kind of get discouraged when we see some of these fees and things like that come up with doula support, because doula care, it can be pricey, just depending on the doula that you find, but also finding that doula that can help you find those different outlets, those different grants and things like that, where you can find different programs that will help find you a doula and at little cost. And I think it's so important that we bring that up, because that's usually, a point where I've heard people have kind of shied away from doula just because there are a lot of out of pocket fees. And it's rare, you see it every once in a while, but it's rare that we see insurance covering doulas. And so I think it's really important to say, okay, here are the grants that I see. And, I kind of keep a running list. Whenever I see one pop up, I'm like, let me just add it to my list just in case, so I can check on it and see if there's open applications for anyone coming into care. So being able to provide that resource is going to be really, really crucial. And I think when you're looking for a doula, find doula that has, those resources and they're willing to kind of share upfront. And I think it's important that doulas are transparent upfront in those interviews as well.
Yeah, definitely agree with everything that you said. Yeah, I think it's important for clients, to sit down and really think about what matters to them. Like what is important for you, and what do you want to really get out of your birth experience, out of your pregnancy, I personally don't believe that anybody should be unsupported, during pregnancy, even if it means I have to take on a client pro bono, and I try to do that once a year. It's necessary. I mean, you cannot do it on your own, and perhaps that doesn't mean that you secure a doula, but there has to be some kind of support. I do believe, of course, like doula support is just, you can't compare. But to your point, it's not feasible for everyone. But I do think that it's important to think about, okay, what is important to me? What do I want to get out of my birth experience? And what do I need to obtain that, And I think that it's awesome because, we're both full spectrum doulas. And so, perhaps there's a portion that we can support in, and then there's a portion where the client feels pretty confident in their partner and, maybe other resources that they have. And, I know for me, I'm willing to work with clients in that way, just to make sure that their needs are met, if it's a good fit. And, the insurance route for sure is starting to gain traction. Medi-Cal has definitely increased their cap in what they provide doulas, which is awesome. And so I think that people are starting to catch on and understand that there's a necessity. And if we're going to do something about this, mortality rate when it comes to women of color, then doulas have to be involved. I think that, states are starting to realize that, hospitals are starting to realize that. And so, I think about, okay, where will we be when it comes to labor and pregnancy in 5 years from now, given some of the things that have happened in the last few years. And so my hope is that things will improve and more people will be able to get the support of a doula in the way they need, whether it's just a portion, whether it's just prenatal, whether it's just postpartum, whether it's everything, but I think first you really need to know, like, what do you need? What do you want to get out of the experience? And then you can kind of go from there.
Yes, yes. They need and they deserve. That's the other
Yes.
thing. That's what I tell people a lot is how can we help you get the birth that you deserve, right?
Right.
So talking about, we touched on this a little bit, but I want to kind of go there and talk about misconceptions about doulas and that you encounter, and also like how do you combat what's out there on social media, right? You hear a lot of stories about doulas providing different types of care. So then people probably come to you thinking, oh, I want you to do this. So how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, that is a real thing. That is a real thing. Chandler, I'm sure you can relate. I like to offer a scope of care so that people know up front, this is what a doula is, this is what a doula is not, social media is very dangerous, and I tell every client that during our first consultation, and I pretty much mention it every single conversation we have. Be careful with Instagram, be careful with what you see on TikTok. I've even seen some misinformation from doulas, which really hurts my heart. Like I close to passing out when I see some things, and so I know for me, I like to support my clients with evidence-based information. I like to, similar to what you said, Chandler, even if it's 2:00 in the morning and you think of a question and you're like, oh my gosh, I just saw this, I'm not sure if it's true. I'd rather you ask than make assumptions, and so it can be very difficult. We're in a very like instant society, instant information. Forget the checks and balances and, if it's actually accurate. And so it is difficult to combat that, whether it's someone's negative experience with the doula that we have to combat, or just complete misinformation. And so I think we just have to be as proactive as we can be, and getting in the front of it and really helping to educate our clients so that they know the truth, and then, I know for me, I'm active on social media. And so I try to do my best with posting, accurate information, evidence-based information, client experiences with emphasis on that client's experience, so that people have somewhere they can go for accurate and true information.
Yeah, I think if we're able to provide evidence-based information to our clients, we've truly done our job because they are able to make informed decisions. And it is so important that they have that space to do that and that they're able to do that. But I would say one misconception, I touched on it a little bit earlier, that I see is that people think if they have their mom or if they have their partner, they don't need a doula. And I think that is a huge misconception because, when the example I always kind of revert to is when a mother sees her child in pain. the way in which she's able to care for her child begins to shift, and support what her child wants begins to shift. And so if we have a mother who is trying to serve in the doula role in the same way, there's a lot of emotions that kind of come into that as well, and will kind of sway decision making, will kind of, encourage in, a mother in labor to move in a certain way. And we don't know if that's the way in which that mother wanted to move. And so I think it's so important to have that person that kind of sits on the outside and says, I just want to make sure you're comfortable with the decision we're making moving forward, and pull that out, that aspect out of it, because I've seen it countless amount of times where, it's really tough for a mother to watch, her daughter in labor. And I think it's so important that we identify that role as a doula from the beginning, and, really setting the stage as to what a doula is. I do it from the very beginning in my contract. We kind of go over it, we talk about it. Just like you had said, Mish, the scope of practice, really just saying, okay, this is what I can do for you. This is what I cannot do for you. And for me, it's super, super important for them to know, because I am in the medical field as well. So I think it's so important to set that expectation from the beginning, knowing that they can send me those articles at 2 a.m. and I'm able to, digest them and say, not a great article to look at. This is great to help make your, informed decision. But also be able to say, all right, look, this is what I'm here for in order to support you from an emotional perspective, a physical perspective when you're in labor, and setting those expectations from the beginning. I'd also just say, just like a big umbrella misconception about doulas in general, I think a lot of people don't realize that they can have a doula and be in the hospital. And a lot of people, they hear the word doula and they think home birth, unmedicated, low risk. And I think it's so important to highlight that doulas are there for every type of birth, and they're able to support for every type of birthing situation. It does not have to be a home birth. It can 1000% be a hospital birth. And, I've even supported patients who have unplanned cesarean section, because they need it. They need that assistance and they need that education from the beginning. So I think it's just so important to highlight that and say, doula care is for everyone that is expecting a child.
I want to thank you both so much for everything that you have shared. It's been a plethora of great nuggets that we all have learned from today. So I think our listeners will really benefit. But before we kind of wrap things up, is there any last words of advice or anything else you would like to share with the Birth Squad?
I think the last thing that I'd want to share, that I think is important for clients to remember, or potential clients, is to be open, and to not go into their birth experience with fear, and I find that the fear kind of starts to dwindle down once they are more knowledgeable, and once we're, going through the prenatal classes and they're informed, right? Because information usually breaks down those fears that, in some ways, are not even real, and so, yeah, I would just encourage anyone, that is contemplating on whether they should have a doula, or just going into their birth, really open, and with a mind of faith instead of fear.
Oh, I love that. And I think just knowing that the support is there and never being afraid to ask for support. Just know that it's out there. There are so many people out there that want to support you in your pregnancy. And so I think it's just important to realize that you can lean on those around you. You don't have to do it all alone. And I think a lot of women feel like they have to be strong and they have to get through this. And, it is okay to rely on someone to help you through your pregnancy and through your postpartum period and through your fertility journey. So I think it's important to just kind of say that out loud so people know that, there's a space for it, and that, as doulas, we welcome it and we encourage it.
Yes, thank you, thank you. You guys made me miss being a doula during this conversation. But we wanted to ask, if you could share how our listeners can learn more about you. So how can they reach you and learn about your the services that you offer if they're interested?
Yeah, so
Yes, absolutely.
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mish. You're good.
Okay. So my doula practice is called Home of Good Mother. And so I can be found on Instagram, Facebook, and also Home of Good Mother.
And my practice is called The Bump Culture. So I can be reached at thebumpculture.com. And then if you'd like to send over an email and contact me directly, it is Chandler, Chandler, at thebumpculture.com. So feel free to reach out, even with questions. I think it's just so important. If you just have burning questions, reach out.
Thank you. Thank you. It was amazing. And I know people are going to get so much out of your episode.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here, sharing everything. Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's the wrap of this episode of The Birth Squad.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We are going to continue sharing stories from more badass birth warriors, because at the end of the day, you are the experts of your experience. And we want to highlight you and your bold, brave, and beautiful journey to motherhood.
And we want to hear from you. Tell us about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Hit us up on Instagram at The Birth Squad, and check out our website, thebirthsquad.com.
Most importantly, be sure to share this episode with your squad.
Until next time, I'm Dr. Ijama Ogwandu.
And I'm Dr. Kamisha Thomas.
Peace, love, and solidarity from the Birth Squad.